I really hate to even look at the news anymore, and websites like Democratic Underground that just are panic mode 24/7. I can't take it. At least that relative that's been in the hospital slash rehab nursing home facility, he's coming back tomorrow, and I can try to get my act together and get moved out, try to find a place. But man, apartments are ridiculous here, and it's just, I don't want to spend a hell of a lot of money on that, because I may have to retire in a couple of years. I may be forced to. And then I'll just note, the other day I checked my bank account, and what a pleasant surprise to get that WEP GPO, as I've talked about, the retro pay from January 2024 until February, or through February 2025. It was sure nice to get that, and very pleasant. It was $2,176. So they were taking, Social Security was taking out $155 a month off my benefit over that stupid, because of that stupid law that was passed during the Reagan years. So I'm glad that I'm getting an increase. And no, I don't think they wouldn't dare try to get rid of SS, as much as Elon Musk has tried to lie about it. They're lying like shit because they want to pay for their damn tax cuts. Go without your fucking tax cuts. Just shut up. And if you don't like it in the United States, go to another goddamn country. But I'm sick of them. But anyway, so that was that. And then I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about some of the DVDs I've been watching and stuff. And I mentioned last time, or the time before, or whatever it was, I was watching some old Jean Harlow movies. And, she was about the cutest actress that ever lived. She wasn't beautiful. She wasn't sexy. She wasn't really any of that. What she was is she was cute. And she's absolutely a scene stealer in just about every movie she was ever in. And it was so sad that all the time she had that career, she was slowly dying of kidney disease. And back in those days, they couldn't treat it. There was nothing they could do about it. And so by the time she made Saratoga with Clark Gable, it was the last of their 6 pairings, and they were great together. By the time she made that, she was terminal, and she would retain water, so she was somewhat bloated. And then with 90% of the movie made, she had died suddenly of uremic poisoning. Just kidney failure, basically. And they were going to shelve it, and then there was public demand that that movie be released because 90% of it was done. So what they did is they put in a stand-in for Jean Harlow named Mary Dees, who should not be mistaken for Mary D., who was actually married to Chico Marx for a while. She was Mary DeVithius or something like that, her real name. But she went by Mary D. This one was Jean Harlow's stand-in, and her name was Mary Dees with an S on it. And so they would film her, from the back or from the side, or the hat was in the way. It was kind of clever. And then they would intersperse clips of Jean Harlow, and at the very end of the movie, it shows Harlow and Gable together. So that way, it was skillfully done. But of course, everybody knew that she had died before the film had ended, or the shooting had ended. But it was kind of eerie in a way, because much of what Harlow's character was, she was kind of a hypochondriac. And, you know, that she was real sick. She was sick all the time. And that's hard to watch when you realize that poor actress really was dying. She didn't know she was dying, but she was literally dying in that film. But, you know, some of Harlow's movies aren't that great. And some of them are like Bombshell. That's her best film. And Red Dust. And Libel Lady. And Redheaded Woman. Those were probably the top of the line films she was in. But she's always worth watching. She was always a lot of fun to watch. And she had such great chemistry with everybody. With co-stars. She was loved by the crew. And Mickey Rooney had said one time he was in a movie with her. I think it was Reckless. And that was a film with that she starred with Spencer Tracy. And he had said that when she died, when Harlow died in 1937, that the entire studio, MGM, just went quiet. It basically, you couldn't hear a sound the day that she died. That's how much she was loved by everybody. And it was just a real tragedy. She was only 26 years old. And so, you know, I was watching her films, and then I got around to watching The Caine Mutiny, which is a good movie, and that starred Humphrey Bogart. But you know what? When I looked at that movie, really, Humphrey Bogart had very relatively little screen time compared to some of the other people in the film. He was almost like he was a supporting player rather than the lead, but he had top billing, probably for box office. And of course he played that wacko, a Donald Trump type, or an Elon Musk type that just was off his rocker crazy. And then when there was a storm and stuff, the crew decided they weren't going to do what he wanted to do. So there was kind of like a mutiny thing, and then there was a court-martial and all that kind of stuff. So it was all done. But again, Humphrey Bogart didn't have that much screen time. I think Van Johnson might have had about the most, and also an actor named Robert Francis, who was only in 4 movies, and this one was his first movie, his best-known movie. And he did pretty well in it. And apparently the book, and I never read the book, but that book was apparently through the eyes of Robert Francis's character. And he was only about, he was only about 24 when he made that movie. And so he made that, and then he made 3 others, and I think Caine Mutiny was filmed in late 53, and then it came out in 54. And then Robert Francis made these other movies that were all military oriented, whether they were Western military or whether they were more contemporary military. They were all military type. And then he was going to star in this movie, but that was like a year later. But unfortunately, he piloted an airplane, and it crashed, and that killed all 3 people aboard. Let's see. This is a website dedicated to him. They were talking about his haircuts here. Let's see. Okay. But anyway, he still had lived with his parents at the time that he died. But it was a very, very tragic story. Yeah, it says here, he practiced takeoffs and landings on the last day of his life. He could easily see from the plane's cockpit almost the entirety of his life's geography. Santa Monica to Long Beach, to Santa Barbara to Burbank, above Glendale and Pasadena and Hollywood. And in the distance, the ocean and mountains where he skied on water and snow. And there, not far from the house, streets and schools, and neighborhood where he lived almost all of his 25 years, is the little Church of the Flowers at Forest Lawn, Glendale. In less than 72 hours, his funeral would be held there, and he would be buried at Forest Lawn, Hollywood Hills, in a hillside plot with a headstone turned eastward toward Pasadena. Bob is said to have been mature beyond his years and could be serious about serious matters. But on this day, he probably was not given so much to introspection or thoughts of the past or mortality. He was having a fine time learning to fly and being with 2 companions along for the ride. And so that's what happened. And that was kind of the introduction. So they go into it, all his genealogy and stuff. I'll link this story, but he died in a small plane crash. But you know that you never know what the hell happened. And he died a couple of months before James Dean. He was a little bit older than James Dean. But you know, it was a big shock. And it was pilot error and so forth. But you don't know what the hell, you know, life does to you. Somebody like that had so much promise, who was so well liked, he dies young. And then you have these sons of bitches that seem to live forever. And I don't need to name any names, but there are plenty of them out there that they never die. They seem like they never die. And then I was also watching Have Gun Will Travel. I've seen the first 3 seasons and stuff on DVD and all that. And then I went and got the 4th season and then part of the 5th season. And, you know, it was such a great show. I don't know why I kind of put it on the back burner, but it was one of my favorites. And it was called The Thinking Man's Western. And, of course, it starred Richard Boone as a character called Paladin. And anyway, he wasn't really a mercenary or a killer for hire. He was there to settle disputes. And he only used a gun when he absolutely had to. But, you know, he went with that, at first it was originally a Navy outfit that he wore when he was on assignment. But then when the makers of the show, the producers, directors, whatever, they realized it filmed black anyway, so they just put him in black instead of blue. And they'd send him all over, and it was interesting that a lot of the shows, there was a lot of outdoor shooting, location shooting, but it wasn't only just in the usual spots like the ranches out in Southern California, or like Lone Pine and some of those places that so many of these westerns were filmed. Some of them were filmed in Oregon. And there was one episode that was filmed in Bend, or near Bend, but the funny thing was, right at the end of the show, when they did like a long shot, what they did is you could see the highway from the distance. I don't know if it was Highway 20, U.S. Highway 20, or whether it was Highway 97. But I thought that was funny. You could see it way there in the background. Anyway, but you couldn't see any cars. That was one thing about it. And, of course, back in those days, 65 years ago, it was, traffic wasn't as heavy as it is now. Anyway. But, anyway, so they did a lot of location shooting. But the show was so good. Again, it was a half hour long, and I think a half hour Western series is optimal. I think when you go to an hour, you're having to pad a lot of the storylines. And an hour and a half, forget it. I mean, that's padding. That's not, you can't really tell a story efficiently in an hour and a half. So anyway, I've been watching that. And, of course, Richard Boone died a long time ago. He died like 44 years ago of cancer. He was only 63. But he was, he was good in that part. He was a classically trained actor. He wasn't all that good looking. He looked more like a villain than he did a hero. But he was really good in that. Very, very good. Very good actor. And he had a lot of unhappy experiences in Hollywood. And eventually he went to Hawaii, and then he ended up in Florida. And that's where he died of cancer. But, you know, the show was real popular. You know, it was in the top 10, I think, and during the era of the Westerns. And some damn guy by the name of Victor DaCosta, who was a rodeo performer. He also did other things for a living. But he decided to sue CBS and, you know, all of that, because he claimed that the producers and creators of Have Gun Will Travel stole his character Paladin. He claimed he went around dressing in black and calling himself Paladin and having the business card and having a little derringer and all this stuff. I mean, there's no way to absolutely prove that, but he thought it was a trademark violation. Well, the problem was he didn't have a trademark on it. He didn't have a copyright on it. So yeah, CBS could do that. They could borrow it, and the producers, they could do that. But of course, there was a lot more to Paladin than just that stuff. I have to admit, the best part of Have Gun Will Travel, and I always look forward to that part, was the main character, the real star of the show was the business card. Have Gun Will Travel, Wire Paladin, San Francisco. And another thing too, when that series first ran, I was like 2 years old, and it went off the air when I was about 8 years old. And that was my first introduction to San Francisco. And I thought San Francisco actually looked like that. But that was my first introduction to it. But getting back to old DaCosta, he tried to sue, and he lost because there was no trademark, there was no copyright, there's no way that his rodeo act could be confused with the series. And there's a fairly high bar set for trademark violations. So he lost. And then eventually he went and got a trademark or copyright or whatever of his character and all this. So then he found a lawyer, tried to sue again. And he went to court, and Richard Boone had died by that time. And, you know, people had basically, I don't want to say they forgot about it, that show, because that show always had a cult following. But he decided to sue, and then around 1991 or something, he won a big settlement. And he won like something like $3.5 million over this. But CBS Viacom went and appealed it, and the Court of Appeals in this particular circuit, and what circuit, does it say? District of Rhode Island, appeal from the United States District Court for the District of Rhode Island, because that's where DaCosta lived. And he even looked a little bit like Richard Boone. Not a whole lot, but there was some similarities. But the chief judge said, nah, we're going to throw this out. $3.5 million this guy won. And he threw it out, because the problem is, this is like double jeopardy, in that you can't just, when you lose a case, and that's the end. You can't, when it's over and done with, you can't go back and bring it back again and try it and try the case on the same stinking grounds. And it makes me wonder what in the hell the lawyers were thinking who represented DaCosta, knowing it was going to get thrown out. And they did. They threw it out. He never got a penny. Nor his heirs. I've seen a website or two where they said, oh, his heirs inherited. No, they didn't. No, it was thrown out on appeal. But and so anyway, it explains what happened. I kind of said it here. And then he said, and then they, with the original case, they said there was nothing. And then DaCosta has now sued again. He sued Viacom, and to which it assigned rerun rights for the old Paladin programs. He again complains that CBS copied his idea, and he says that Viacom, by broadcasting the old CBS programs, has violated state and federal trademark and unfair competition laws. The district court permitted the suit to proceed. It shouldn't have allowed it. Waste of money. A jury found in DaCosta's favor, and Viacom appeals. In our view, DaCosta's new suit depends for its success upon relitigating issues that this court already has decided against him, and for that reason the doctrine of collateral estoppel bars his new claims. We therefore reverse the district court and order judgment for the defendant, which was CBS. So he lost. So he basically was a frivolous lawsuit. It was a frivolous lawsuit, and it tied up this show for years. You couldn't see it in reruns, and of course, this was right about the time VHS was popular. But fortunately, this case was all settled, and now you can get it on DVD and maybe stream it. But yeah, that's what happened. He got his ass handed to him, and then DaCosta died the following year. But that's kind of the story about Have Gun Will Travel. But yeah, I love that show. You know, it takes my mind off all the shitty things that are going on in this country, and I still have to find a place to live, another place to live. I can't handle having somebody almost having died on me in December. But anyway, that is enough of this long-winded ramble, and it's nice not to have to talk much about politics and current events. So anyway, that's it.